Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We hear the incredible journey of an Ontario man who's a quadriplegic and how he's making his way across the country on his wheelchair. During his party's policy convention in Quebec City, Tory leader Pierre Poilievre took another shot at the Prime Minister over his government's carbon tax. And residents of the Shoe Swamp in BC returned home to witness the devastation left behind after a wildfire wiped out many homes and businesses.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. An Ontario man is making the over 7,500-kilometer trip across Canada and defying the odds each and every day. Kevin Mills was involved in a serious accident over 10 years ago when he injured his spinal cord, causing him to become a quadriplegic. Now, he's decided to make the cross-Canada trek in a hand-crank wheelchair with his best friend. BCN's Micah Quinn has more.
We got both of us in a shot! Smile!
Kevin Mills and his biking buddy, Nikki Davenport, have embarked on an incredible cycling journey across the country, and they're making sure to have just a little bit of fun while they're at it. Back in 2009, Mills suffered a spinal cord injury during a vacation to Cuba for his sister's wedding.
We got down there and I was out in the ocean, probably pretty far offshore, and a rogue wave just came and picked me up, and it dumped me headfirst into the ocean floor, and I was immediately paralyzed.
Mills says he hasn't let his injury slow him down, and now he's using a specialized manual wheelchair to journey across the country.
I have a bar underneath, and I pull the bike in, and it like clicks into my wheelchair, so it's part of my wheelchair, and I'm cranking like this. So as a quadriplegic, I do have some arm use, but I don't have everything. So I don't have hand function, tricep function. And what happens is I get my wrists locked in and I'm pedaling like this, and then I pull back to brake. And there's some power assist to get me up the hills, which I don't know if it would be possible as a quad without it, but it was life-changing for me. Like when I first got it, allowed me to bike with my son, and yeah, it was a pretty life-changing bike.
The duo started their expedition on the far east coast of Canada.
We started in Cape Spear, near St. John's in Newfoundland. Our first day of biking was May 24th, so we've been going at it since then. And we're going to be going to Victoria, ending there, hopefully on the breakwater, if that's possible. That's kind of significant for me too, where I used to free dive and stuff. And we're hoping to be done by the end of the month. We're going to finalize plans and get a date in.
Mills told us it's been amazing to meet people from around the country and talk to them about his story.
We've had people cheer us on along the side of the road, which was just incredible. So, and after a hard day of biking, that's really uplifting. If I can inspire some people with anyone, but especially people with disabilities, to get out, get active, get moving, that's what we want to do.
If you want to keep track of Mills on his cross-Canada trip, you can visit pedalingpossibilities.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Wow, what a story. Go, Kevin, go. You know, this year's dry conditions have been very difficult in terms of crop yields for many southern Alberta farmers. David Bishop, director of Alberta Grains, says crop yields are very low. He says they're about a quarter to half below normal. Bishop says the dry conditions not only affect crop farmers, but also cattle ranchers.
There's no pasture, very little pasture, so they're having to downsize the herd and so forth. So it's more than just the grain side of it. It's basically all of agriculture in the southern part of the province. Agriculture is a pretty big economic driver in Alberta, and as a producer, we like to upgrade equipment, expand and so forth. But in the last few years, with our crops being underperforming because of dry weather, it's a hurt on all of the economy in southern Alberta also. So it affects more than just farmers. It affects basically the economy of the province.
Stats Canada says at the end of August, 59% of the entire country was classified as abnormally dry. You know, it has been quite dry in many parts of southern Alberta lately. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, so many in both Alberta and BC are praying for some sustained rain, not just to help with our crops, but also to put out many of the wildfires.
Oh, so true, Hal. Yeah, we didn't see a lot of rain in this region today. Mostly sunny skies today, high of 22 degrees. Partly cloudy skies overnight with an overnight low of 5 degrees. Now, as we move into Friday, though, that's where we're going to be seeing some of that moisture develop that our farmer friends have been praying for. We are seeing a 60% chance of showers late in the morning and into the afternoon, high of only 18 degrees. And then, you know what? That's it for the rain for the rest of the week as we are moving back into more summer-like conditions. And I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Thousands of residents evacuated after the Bush Creek East wildfire tore through the Shuswap in BC around 3 weeks ago have now been allowed to return home. The fight continued against the blaze, however, which is still burning out of control after scorching more than 430 square kilometers.
So today is all about people, the residents coming in and seeing what's happened with their homes and getting a bit of closure and helping them with the grieving process and moving into the recovery process for them and the rebuilding process, hopefully. We had incredible winds the night of the 18th, and the fire took a run and it moved 20 kilometers in 12 hours, and it was just was burning whatever was in its path, including our fire hall.
It certainly was something to see. The fact that it had moved so quickly to, from upping away in the hills to, rank 6 behavior crossing the highway and moving as quickly as it had was something I had never seen before.
Wow. Local governments and First Nations impacted by the wildfires in British Columbia now qualify for disaster financial assistance. The province says the funds will help with losses that are not covered by insurance, including damage to infrastructure like roads and bridges. Emergency management officials say estimates are not completed yet for how much the program will cost. All Indigenous communities, electoral areas, and municipalities within 15 regional districts are eligible. There are currently 409 active wildfires in BC, including 21 which are burning out of control on Vancouver Island. Meanwhile, in central Greece, roads have turned into raging rivers as rainstorms created massive flooding. Some parts of the country saw half of their annual rainfall occur in just a 24-hour period. In the mountain regions of Pilion and Volos, emergency officials have banned traffic altogether and warned people to stay indoors. A number of homes and businesses have been completely destroyed due to the severe flooding. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre addressed his party's caucus in Quebec City on Thursday. Poilievre attacked the federal government's carbon tax once again, saying the Prime Minister wants to quadruple the levy, which will make things even more unaffordable for Canadians.
To 61 cents a litre. He does this while he jets around the world, while his Environment Minister goes to Beijing. In China, the country that emits by far the highest greenhouse gases of any country on Earth. He won't be wagging his finger at the leaders in that country. He's too busy wagging his fingers at single mothers back in Canada who have to buy groceries for their kids, or working class carpenters who need a pickup truck to do their jobs. And when they do their jobs, work doesn't pay. They earn an extra $1, and with clawbacks and taxes, they can lose 80 cents of that dollar. We punish hard work in this country after 8 years of Trudeau.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with business leaders in Singapore. Trudeau is there for a 2-day bilateral visit ahead of the G20 Leader Summit in India. He says his trip is focusing on strengthening Canada's trade with the Indo-Pacific region.
You've spent a lot of capital investing in Canada and in Canadian innovation, and the opportunity to do even more together is, I think, something that that we're very excited about. The world is in need of diversification of supply chains, and Canada has a level of stability, of innovation, of both resources and resourcefulness that companies like Temasek are excited to be part of, and we're very much looking forward to working with you as you grow your portfolio in Canada.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We're very keen to invest more in Canada with the innovation that we've seen in the Canadian market, and I'm sure that in the years to come there'll be many more opportunities for us to engage with the Canadian market.
G20 host India, meanwhile, is proposing a global biofuel alliance. Officials there say it will help to support energy transition around the world.
Biofuels are fuels that are derived from food-based feedstock or plant-based feedstock. For example, sugarcane and corn are the sources of bioethanol production today. Biofuel production requires non-renewable resources such as land, water, fertilizer, which is often produced from petrochemicals, that is oil derived. So when you count emissions from all that, for example, even water pumping, if you're using an electric motor or a diesel motor, involves emissions.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, there are those in the federal government who want to see Canada hit net zero emissions by the year 2035. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says that's unreasonable and the year 2050 may be a little more realistic. David Schick with the Canadian Fuels Association agrees with Smith, saying 2035 may be a little ambitious.
So I think that the goals are extremely ambitious by the federal and provincial governments, depending on what province you're in. But I think it's the intention that's critical. And I don't think we're going to be able to get to net zero in 2035. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be taking the steps that we can to improve sustainable performance in all of our different sectors, and transportation being the big one for us, which is over a quarter of the emissions in Canada. I think that we need to find the common ground around the practical application of these new policies and balance that against the ambition to make sure that we're actually making changes that we're looking for.
David Schick will also discuss the advancement in different fuel sources here in Alberta during my Q&A with him coming up after Business News. The Alberta government announced a cash infusion of close to $3 million to increase wages of frontline workers here in the province. Officials say the funding will also help to support those with FASD, or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Specifically, this funding supports, on average, a 10% wage increase for frontline FASD workers. Like many industries, the social services sectors has been experiencing workforce challenges for some time. The sector is struggling to attract and retain staff. We understand the pressures inflation is causing and the cost of living is causing for many Albertans. Funding increases will go a long way to improving workforce challenges and providing more equity in the workforce. This wage increase is in addition to the $330 million in funding our government announced as part of Budget 2023 to support frontline workers across Alberta's social sector.
Lethbridge City Hall will be lit up in red for the rest of the week as part of FASD Awareness Month. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a disability that impacts the brain and body of those who are exposed to alcohol during fetal development. According to the Alberta government, an estimated 4% of Canadians have FASD. This means around 174,000 Albertans have the developmental disability. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints recently announced plans to build a temple right here in Lethbridge, and now they have a location for the new complex. It'll be built on more than 9 acres located at the corner of Whoop Up Drive West and Mauritania Road West. Plans call for a multi-story temple of around 45,000 square feet, along with a distribution center. Aaron Lowe, the Lethbridge East stake president for the LDS Church, explains why the construction of a temple in Lethbridge is necessary amid an abundance of Mormon churches already set up here in our city.
Many people will understand that there are sacred places, and many religions and have sacred places. For us, the temple is the most sacred place on earth, and we believe that it's the house of the Lord. And so while a meeting house is something that we certainly go on a regular basis, we go to the meeting house for meetings, for Sunday meetings. The temple is a special place where we actually believe that it's the house of the Lord. And so that's the reason it was so exciting.
Lowe says a groundbreaking ceremony, along with a rendering of what the temple will look like, will be announced at a later date. You know, many would say us here in southern Alberta have enjoyed a nice hot summer so far, but before you know it, the white stuff will be arriving once again. A popular ski resort in southern Alberta is Castle Mountain. Cole Fawcett, who's the group's marketing manager, says they actually receive more snow than many of the other resorts in the province, so lots of powder for skiing.
Castle has some exceptional terrain. It's has a great variety and has great terrain for advanced and expert level skiers, intermediates and beginners too. But one of the things that really sets us apart from some of our competitors is the mountains on which we occupy. We have an abundance of terrain, and we see the most snow on average in the province of Alberta, period, of any other resort.
Be sure to catch the full interview with Cole Fawcett from Castle Mountain Ski Resort and BCN's Naveen Day coming up later in our broadcast. No snow today, not even some rain. We need a little bit of moisture here. We had kind of a mixed bag, some sunshine, clouds, but it's been very dry. As for how the rest of the week and weekend are shaping up, we'll have those details for you in just a moment. Well, we received a little bit of moisture in parts of southern Alberta last night, but if you talk to our farmers, not nearly enough. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, as for the long-range forecast, there doesn't appear to be much moisture on the horizon.
Yeah, you are so right about that. In fact, the only moisture on the horizon is actually right here. Friday, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers late in the morning into the afternoon. Temperatures much cooler also than what we have been seeing lately, 18 for a high. Not for long, though. As we get further into the week, it's going to get hotter and hotter. 20 for a high on Saturday, up to 23 Sunday, 27 on Monday, all the way up to 28 on Tuesday, and 26 for a high on Wednesday, with mainly sunny skies all the way through. So if you love those hot summer temperatures, yeah, you still have another week of it for sure. Now, the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is 22 degrees. So we're going to be seeing temperatures much higher than that. Not Friday, though. Average low for this time of year, 7 degrees. 35 was our high day. That was the record breaker. That happened back in 1998. And the chilliest was -2. That happened back in 1986. Sun rose this morning at 6:55. Sunset this evening at 8:02. We're looking at 13 hours and 7 minutes of daylight. Over on the west coast tomorrow, mainly sunny conditions. 18 for a high in Victoria. 16 near the water, though. 20 in Vancouver. Looking at 23 the further inland you go. 22 for a high in Edmonton tomorrow with increasing clouds late in the morning. 17 for a high in Calgary with actually clearing and closer to noon, but mostly partly cloudy skies in the morning. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we are seeing those sunny conditions in the morning, increasing clouds. We could see a slight chance of showers later in the day. Saskatoon 20 for a high, 24 in Regina. Clear skies expected in Winnipeg with a high of 23 degrees. Now, as we get into central Canada, we're looking at mainly cloudy conditions in Toronto, but hot temperatures, looking at a high of 26 degrees. Even warmer, though, in Ottawa and Montreal, as we're still seeing those heat warnings in effect. Now, there could be a cooler air mass approaching Ottawa, developing by Friday. 28 for a high there. Still high humidex. Could see a 30% chance of showers with that heat. 29 for a high in Montreal, also sitting under those heat warnings. We could see temperatures starting to diminish by Friday and looking more seasonable as we get closer to Monday. Could also see a severe thunderstorm watch. They are looking at that overnight this evening, and those 60% chance of showers could continue into tomorrow in Montreal. In Fredericton tomorrow, 29 for a high. Also looking at very high heat, high humidity there. Could see showers and thunderstorms. Clear skies expected in Halifax, 25 for a high. 21, though, by the coast. That could be your reprieve. Same thing in Charlottetown, 29 for a high, rather, but 21 along the coast there. Could see some showers as well. 22 for a high in St. John's. 2 millimeters of rain is expected there, along with some fog, at 20 to 40 millimeters, 20 to 40 kilometers per hour winds. That's what I'm trying to say. There you have it. That is your weather forecast.
After being on the job for less than a year, the chief executive of Indigo Books and Music is leaving. The Toronto-based retailer says Peter Ruiz has stepped down but offered no explanation as to why. It's the latest surprise shakeup at Indigo, which has faced a slew of leadership changes over the past year. The biggest was the departure of Heather Reisman, the company's founder who built Indigo into a Canadian retail stalwart. She served as chief executive until last year when Ruiz took over and officially retired from the board of directors on August the 22nd. BlackBerry expects its second quarter revenue to be around $132 million US. The Ontario-based company says it faced delays in closing certain large deals and lowered its full-year revenue outlook for its Internet of Things business. The early estimate comes as the company continues a review of new alternatives for its portfolio of businesses, which could see the company break up its operations. BlackBerry is expected to report its full results for its second quarter on September the 28th. Precision Drilling has signed an agreement to purchase CWC Energy Services. The deal is valued at around $141 million. Precision CEO says the deal expands the company's service business across North America with high-quality rigs and field personnel. The deal still needs approval from CWC shareholders. A report by the World Bank says online work is growing around the world and is creating an important source of employment for women and young people in countries where jobs are fairly scarce. The report estimates there are around 435 million online gig workers globally. It says demand for gig work rose 41% between 2016 and the first quarter of this year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 94 points on the day to finish at 20,132. The Dow was up 57 points to 34,500. The S&P 500 was down 14 on the day to 4451, and the Nasdaq was down 123 points to 13,748. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 83 cents to 86.71 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to 258 US. Gold was up 3.10 on the day to 19.66 US an ounce, and silver was down 20 cents to 22.97 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.90 per bushel, barley's at $7.51, canola's at $17.42, and corn is at $9.22 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was up 95 cents to 183.65. Feeder cattle were up 243 to 255.58, and lean hogs October contract was up 95 cents to 82.83. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.07 US. Recapping one of our top stories, local governments and First Nations impacted by the wildfires in British Columbia now qualify for disaster financial assistance. The province says the funds will help with losses that are not covered by insurance, including damage to infrastructure like roads and bridges. There are currently 409 active wildfires in BC, including 21 which are burning out of control on Vancouver Island. The oil and gas sector in Alberta has apparently made incredible strides when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. David Schick with Canadian Fuels Association will have more details for us in just a moment. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, be sure to check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Downtown Lethbridge BRZ is proud to host Downtown Night Markets in Festival Square, September 14th, 21st, and 28th. After a long day, come enjoy the evening ambiance with live music, delicious eats from food trucks and restaurants, plus vendor shopping from 5 to 8 p.m. Lethbridge Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Tuesdays at 10 to 11 a.m. and Thursdays 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come enjoy an hour of fun and get active. The location of each roving gym alternates between Legacy Park, Gyro Spray Park, and Henderson Lake Park. Locations of weekly roving gyms can be found online at lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. Advance registration is required as space is limited. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The Canadian Fuels Association has made notable strides in environmental sustainability. Now, the Vice President of Western Canada, David Schick, joins us now today from Ottawa to discuss their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in refineries and enhancing energy efficiency in Canada. David, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you provide kind of an overview of the Canadian Fuel Association's key initiatives aimed at enhancing environmental sustainability in the energy sector?
For sure. Well, first off, the Canadian Fuels Association represents about 95% of the transportation fuels that we use in Canada, and we have 15 refineries that produce those fuels to get them to market. And so we see a change in the way the world is working, where we have to have environmental sustainability at our forefront of our business, but we also need to make sure that we're maintaining an affordable and reliable fuel supply to Canadians. So a lot of the things we're doing right now are in response to policy changes, but also because the market is demanding these lower carbon products. And so what we're working with is the finished fuels have to have a lower carbon intensity, is what we call it, so they're not as environmentally impactful. And to do that, we do a number of different things. We blend biofuels, for instance. We're working on putting in electric vehicle charging stations in a lot of our retail sites. And the refineries need to be improved on a life cycle basis to make sure that these lower carbon intensity fuels get to market, and we're making them in Canada.
So David, what are some of the things you really wish people knew about Canadian energy? Just how clean it is, really?
Well, I think it's the strength of the Canadian energy system and how it needs to evolve. So we have a wonderful resource in Canada around our oil and gas sector. They're making tremendous strides on the upstream. We're working on it on the downstream. But the great opportunity we have in Canada with the expertise and infrastructure that we have here and the biomass that we can use to make new types of fuels is to make sure that we're complementing our existing strength of industry with these new products to get them to consumers and have environmental benefit and still have a robust economy.
Now, David, can you share some new technologies that your organization has implemented to really mitigate environmental impacts?
Well, I think that it's not necessarily our organization. We're working out with all of our members, which are all of the major refiners and distributors of products in the country. Some of the things that they're doing is really interesting is co-processing, which is taking renewable feedstocks that aren't crude oil, that have lower environmental impact, and blending those with traditional crude oils to make these lower carbon products. This utilizes the existing infrastructure in the industry, and it doesn't change what we need to have in for our fleets. The finished fuel is the same, but it allows us to make these products with a much lower carbon intensity. So this involves gathering up different feedstocks. So the canola industry is a tremendous opportunity to use that product for new fuels. Another thing that we're doing is having facilities built. A great example is the Imperial facility in Edmonton at Strathcona, where they're building a renewable diesel plant, which is 100% renewable feedstocks that can be blended with traditional diesel to make these products available to consumers. So it's all about carbon sequestration is another opportunity, but all of these different pieces put together to try to make sure that we can continue to utilize our fleet, utilize our existing infrastructure, but have much less carbon impact on our communities.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been talking a lot about hydrogen recently, saying it's not just the future, it's now, and she wants to make Alberta a hydrogen leader around the world. What are your thoughts on that?
We produce a lot of hydrogen in Alberta, and the opportunity with the Edmonton hub is a terrific one because there's a lot of refineries there that make hydrogen, and the hydrogen is necessary to break down the crude oil to make these products that we make today. So hydrogen is a tremendous opportunity for the future. It's going to take time to scale up in order to make the environmental benefit that we're looking for, but we see it as a key part of the energy future over time.
So David, in what ways have you collaborated with government agencies or environmental organizations?
Well, all of the policy development that's been going on, the clean fuel regulation is a great example at the federal level. We started working on that in 2016 and 17, and it took 6 years to get it to where we are today. So we're working constantly with the provincial and federal governments, trying to have a balanced approach to making sure that we can maintain a reliable energy supply while making sure that the environmental sustainability opportunities are realized, and also building up opportunities for investment in Canada, which we think is really critical to the long-term opportunities. So we need to work with all of these different stakeholders and different sectors that can provide new types of feedstocks for us. The carbon sequestration is a big piece too, developing hydrogen for markets. So we really work with a broad spectrum of stakeholders to make sure that we're engaging all of the necessary parties. The collaboration is critical because transitioning an energy system can have tremendous impacts on the economy and on the consumer. And so how do you mitigate that with still keeping tension on the system to improve our sustainability goals?
The federal government has set aside some very ambitious goals of net zero emissions, like the year 2035. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says, no, maybe it's more like 2050. What are your thoughts when it comes to net zero emissions? Is it really achievable?
It's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of effort. So I think that the goals are extremely ambitious by the federal and provincial governments, depending on what province you're in. But I think it's the intention that's critical. And I don't think we're going to be able to get to net zero in 2035. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be taking the steps that we can to improve sustainable performance in all of our different sectors, and transportation being the big one for us. which is over a quarter of the emissions in Canada. I think that we need to find the common ground around the practical application of these new policies and balance that against the ambition to make sure that we're actually making changes that we're looking for. And our members are committed to producing and distributing more low carbon fuels. But it is going to be a challenge to meet the timelines that are in front of us, because there's a lot of overlapping policies too that we need to understand in order to create investment certainty we need to be successful in getting these things done in Canada.
So let's flesh out more about some of the measures that have been taken to enhance energy efficiencies in Canadian fuel refineries, and what results have those efforts really yielded so far?
Well, I think some of the big things that we've been doing so far are carbon sequestration work that's being done at Northwest Redwater is a great project. In British Columbia, the refineries at Tidewater and Prince George, and in Burnaby at the Parkland refinery, they're doing co-processing and making these new fuels. So those are important steps. We're working with government on some of these incentive policies to make sure that we can improve refinery performance as well, because we're competing against capital demands from the US under something called the Inflation Reduction Act, which creates a lot of incentives to invest in the United States, and it's an industrial policy rather than a green environmental policy. And so we want to make sure that we leverage those opportunities to utilize our products and resources we have here for the future. So a lot of what we're doing as a sector right now is taking traditional biofuels, renewable diesel, biodiesel, and ethanol, and blending them into vehicles and building that structure, as well as building those facilities. A lot of our members have these types of businesses now. For example, Federated Co-op and Suncor have very large ethanol facilities, for example.
Here's a question I have for you. When I was a kid, I remember the diesel was considerably cheaper than regular gasoline. But now it seems to be the opposite. Every time I drive by a gas station, see, diesel seems to be 10 cents a liter more. Why is that?
Well, there's the decarbonization of our energy system really has some sectors that are much harder to decarbonize than others. So in the light duty vehicle sector, we can blend more ethanol, and electric vehicles make sense. Well, electric vehicles don't make a lot of sense today for aviation, for rail, for marine, and long haul trucking. So diesel becomes more in demand because it doesn't have the opportunities to decarbonize with some of the other methods that are in front of us in terms of alternatives. So that diesel demand, we can improve the diesel performance in terms of its environmental impact, but that product is going to be necessary for a longer period of time because the electrification of light duty vehicles is more practical than it is for some of these larger transport.
So it's all about supply and demand here, obviously. David, what strategies and technologies are being employed to minimize water usage and really promote responsible water management in the refining process?
Well, I think that one of the critical things is that every dimension of the refinery needs to change and improve. So we have the GHG performance, which is all of the carbon impacts that we're working on, but we also are having more and more stringency attached to air emissions and water emissions as those policies become more stringent as well. So increased monitoring of these products and making sure that everything that we do is more and more responsible as we respond to the needs of environmental performance. So in terms of water, it really depends on the individual refineries, but we want to be minimizing all of the inputs that we have going into the refining process. And for instance, when you talk about hydrogen, one of the primary ways of making hydrogen is using water through electrolysis. And so we need a lot of electricity and a lot of water. How are we going to do that in such a way that doesn't adversely affect other parts of the community?
So how does the Canadian Fuels Association really address concerns about the environmental impacts of transporting fuel products, such as maybe pipeline spills and emissions from transportation?
Well, that's a big part of what we do. So the Canadian Fuels Association traditionally used to be called the Canadian Petroleum Products Institute. We do all of the driver training of the fuel truck drivers. We coordinate that through third parties. We work with different committees within our members to try to make sure that we have strong sharing of best practices when it comes to environmental usages, something called the National distribution committee for us. So that works on trucking practices, make sure that we're monitoring and maintaining our emergency preparedness. And I'm very proud of the sector. Actually, right now, today, we're working and accepting an award for the response to the BC floods because our members did a tremendous job in making sure that the fuel supply was maintained when we went through that environmental or climate-related challenge a couple of years ago in British Columbia.
Well, congratulations. Now, what steps are being taken to ensure that the Canadian Fuels Association really remains at the forefront of environmental innovation and sustainability in the future?
Well, what we're doing is really what I call broadening the tent. We understand that the oil and gas sector is going to be critical for us, but we need to be working with other sectors, with environmental groups, with the agriculture sector, which can provide us with feedstocks to make these fuels. We're working with forestry, who have that opportunity as well. We stay in closer contact and work with the electric vehicle manufacturers, the automakers, to make sure that we're optimizing the individual opportunities that we have in front of us. We work closely with, or starting to work more closely with universities and making sure that the research goes into areas that are not just academically interested, but help us meet our compliance obligations as well. So it really needs to be a full spectrum approach and to working with different sectors, looking what's going on around the world. We work closely with the International Energy Agency on some of these opportunities, what we're seeing in other jurisdictions, and sharing those with our members and making sure they're part of those conversations so that we can stay at the forefront of future improvements in this space.
So how does the association really balance the need for economic growth and energy security with the imperative to reduce environmental impacts?
That's the balancing act, because we can't have a situation where the consumers can't tolerate these higher prices, which we're seeing right now. We have an affordability challenge in Canada and around the world, and yet we still have an imperative more strategically to make sure that we're meeting our climate change goals. So one of the things I think is important is that, as I've described, we can make these fuels much more environmentally friendly, but still maintain the same fleet. Now that's much more intuitively, that's much more cost effective than changing out the fleet and making everybody have new electric vehicles, which requires grid changes and all that. That's going to be important, and it's a piece of the puzzle, but we want to make sure that we're optimizing the opportunities that are fit for purpose to make sure that the costs are being maintained or are affordable for consumers, and yet we're still making the changes that are necessary in order to move forward on our environmental goals. So that is a constant balancing act for us, is that we can't have the pendulum swing too far one way or the other. Otherwise, we're going to be compromising our economic opportunity for future, because the world is demanding these things. And also the consumers need to be able to afford and live a comfortable life in a size of Canada, and transporting goods and services and people around necessitates that we have an affordable energy system.
You know, David, some critics of the Trudeau government are shaking their heads saying, why do you want to phase out oil and gas when there's so much of a need across the world right now, and Alberta has an abundant supply where we can help Canada really flourish economically? So what do you believe is the future for oil and gas here in Alberta?
I think it's a bright future. I work a lot with the upstream side of the business, and Canada is producing these products responsibly, where in other parts of the world they're not. And the world is still going to demand and need these products for many decades to come. So let's make sure that the world understands how responsibly we're producing these products, and make the changes. And I view a lot of these alternatives as complementary, like hydrogen, like biofuels. Doesn't mean you take oil and gas away. You're supplementing what we're doing with our traditional oil and gas industry in a responsible way. And we want to make sure that we're supporting those initiatives on the upstream side, when we're producing the oil and gas, with things like the carbon sequestration opportunities we have with organizations like the Pathways Group. All of those things are tremendously important. And then we leverage that expertise that we've developed in Canada, which we're world leaders in now, and share that around the world. I think that it's the opportunity for our products to be recognized for the environmental improvements we made and the quality that they have today, and then also share those services around the world so that other countries can benefit from what we've learned here.
David Schick is the Vice President of the Western Canada operation for the Canadian Fuels Association. David, thanks so much for joining us today from our nation's capital in Ottawa.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being part of your show.
The winter season sees southern Alberta powdered with the white stuff, and I'm talking about snow, which attracts lots of avid skiers to the area. And Cole Fawcett is the go-to guy for all things related to preparing for an exhilarating time on the slopes. He offers valuable insights into the meticulous process of readying the ski hill for the season, shedding light on the behind-the-scenes efforts that ensure optimal conditions and what to watch out for. Cole, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And now, as the ski season at Castle Mountain approaches, what are the key steps you recommend for avid skiers and snowboarders to prepare themselves for the season on the slopes?
Yeah, great question. So if we can get, we don't want to lapse into not working out, not being active through the fall season. I think that's all too tempting for so many of us as the days get a little bit shorter and the temperatures get a bit cooler. So trying our best to keep active, and even if we can get a little bit of strength training in to keep those legs and that core strong for the coming ski season, because we're going to need those muscles when the snow hits the ground. Aside from that, we want to be looking at our gear, making sure that it's ready for the season. And for most of us, that's only going to necessitate a tune-up of skis or snowboards. So a wax or a sharpen of the edges or a grind of the base to make it nice and smooth and flat again. And of course, that wax on top to make sure that it slides really nice on the snow. So I think those are probably the two major things. And aside from that, it pays to think ahead with respect to looking at season passes or frequency cards, what we call our WOW card, to save money, of course, before the season gets here.
So you talked about physically preparing yourself for the season. Now, before we started recording this interview, I revealed to you that I'm not really into skiing. I'm very much a novice. So what would you recommend to someone like myself who is probably going to be hitting the slopes for the first time this year?
So for first-timers, there are a lot of great resources out there. Visiting any resort's website and exploring lesson options is going to be probably the most pivotal thing. And of course, I mean, the other things that you probably go without saying, like making sure that you have, a nice warm jacket, nice warm snow pants or ski pants, appropriate clothing in general terms is really essential. First timers generally aren't going to run out to a ski shop and buy all the equipment they need, like ski boots, skis, or snowboard and snowboard boots. And that's certainly not necessary. All of the resorts within Alberta and British Columbia and further afar are going to offer equipment rentals. So usually you're going to want to look at a beginner snowboard or a beginner ski package. And by package, we mean it's going to come with instruction. It's going to come with the equipment you need in terms of that technical equipment, like the skis or the snowboard and the boots and the bindings. It will also come with a helmet, which we highly recommend. Nobody wants to knock the noggin while they're out there. And it will come with a ticket, a lift ticket, which is a little thing that you'll just put on your person that allows you access to the ski lifts. And so when you combine that equipment, the instruction, and the lift ticket, those are usually all packaged together at a reasonably attractive rate and on a full day or a half day basis. And that is the best way to introduce yourself to the sport, bar none.
Absolutely, because it sounds like it's all inclusive. It has everything you need there. So could you provide insights into what goes on behind the scenes and the process for preparing the ski hill for the upcoming season?
So, I mean, preparing for the season to come really starts with the end of the season prior. So, as a resort, we're going through processes like establishing budgets and guidelines for and operational dates, as an example, setting those dates out for when we're going to be open the following season, putting plans in place to get enough staff. And then on a more technical term, there's a team of about 24 staff members at Castle Mountain Resort specifically that are here full-time year-round, getting things ready. And a good deal of those folks are on the outside operations or maintenance side of our business. And they're in a situation where they're doing all kinds of off-season preventative maintenance on lifts, on snowcats, on other equipment, such as buildings, of course, snowmaking equipment. So the snow machines that make snow early season to kind of get us that great base on which we start the season on. So we're not, encountering as many other obstacles that may lie beneath the snow coverage. And then we have a number of off-season projects too, kind of lumped on top of all of those normal things that we just have to do each and every season, that normal off-season maintenance. So in terms of what we're doing this season at Castle, we have purchased another new snowcat, which aren't cheap. They're multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
When you make that investment. Wonderfully capable machines, but extraordinarily expensive. We have added some snowmaking equipment to our fleet to get us in a position where we can be open reliably when we say we intend to be. There is some building maintenance going on, some new roofing on our staff accommodation, some interior upgrades within the day lodge and our cafeteria and our washrooms, and then some equipment upgrades with one of our lifts. The Huckleberry chairlift is getting a new digital drive, which is more or less the brain of the lift and will help us increase the reliability of that lift for years to come.
Now, you've touched on this a bit with improvements you've made to the resort, but for those that might be new to Castle Mountain, what are the distinctive features of your resort that really set it apart from the others? And what should visitors be particularly excited about?
Well, first and foremost, if you're from the greater Lethbridge area, this is the closest Rocky Mountain resort to anybody living in greater Lethbridge, or really anybody in the southwestern portion of the province. So that in and of itself is important to note. Castle has some exceptional terrain. It's has a great variety and has great terrain for advanced and expert level skiers, intermediates and beginners too. But one of the things that really sets us apart from some of our competitors is the mountains on which we occupy. We have an abundance of terrain, and we see the most snow on average in the province of Alberta, period, of any other resort.
Wow.
Aside from that, there is a certain, I think, different feel to Castle. It's more laid back, it's more homey. It is owned and operated by the community. We have over 200 shareholders who are almost exclusively Albertans and who put their money into the resort basically to see it continue to exist kind of from the mid-90s onward, when it wasn't quite as vibrant, and it wasn't in a position where it was sustainable. And today, at least at this point in time, we are on a path to sustainability and on a path to upgrading some of the assets that we have here, some of the older lifts as an example.
And beyond skiing itself, resorts often offer a variety of activities and events. Could you share some of the events and activities that Castle Mountain has planned for this upcoming season?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the specific dates, we're in a situation where those are still being mulled over, I guess you could say. Most of our programming is going to be ski or snowboard related, whether it's an on-mountain scavenger hunt, or it's a ski race, or a freestyle competition, or a big mountain competition. Most of what we have here is going to take place on the snowy slopes in some way, shape, or form. As far as non-skiing stuff goes, we do offer a cross-country ski network here at the resort. It's pretty small, but it exists. And adjacent to us within the Castle Provincial Park, there are some maintained, groomed cross-country skiing and snowshoe trails, very close proximity to us. And I mean, aside from that, the other thing that we have that's that's unique to Castle and is actually very unique in North America is we have kind of what most people would think of as a ski resort with ski lifts, and you take the lift up and you ski down a run, and it may be all natural terrain or like powder, or it may be groomed nightly. But we also have something called cat skiing or snow cat skiing. And that's where you actually hop into one of these snow cats, and it has a cabin on the back of it that's kind of like a mini bus in a sense, but it's capable of climbing snow-covered mountains. And cat skiing for us is a very exclusive experience. It's only 12 people per day, 5 days a week, and they get about 1,000 acres of skiable terrain all to themselves. So that's very unique. A lot of cat skiing operations are like in the backcountry. Sometimes you'll fly in via helicopter, or there'll be heli skiing operations. But at Castle, we actually have both of those operations kind of side by each. In fact, you actually take one of the chairlifts to get up to the cat, and then every run you go up the cat, up the lift, up the cat, ski down, and then repeat that several times a day. So
that cat skiing sounds a lot of fun. So what recommendations do you have for visitors regarding maintenance and selecting the right equipment for the conditions they might occur at the mountain?
Yeah, well, some might say, especially if you're in the ski industry, you can never have enough pairs of skis or snowboard. But really, that's not a feasible thing for most of the population. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, you want to select. I'm not a great expert in this field. There are some great experts in equipment selection at retail stores across Alberta and beyond, of course, and some great resources online. But certainly doing your homework, putting some time into understanding what ski or snowboard works best in what conditions, and putting some thought into where you like to go on the mountains and what type of terrain you like to access. Those are all really valuable things to put a little bit of time and thought into. But certainly there's no substitute for visiting your local ski or snowboard shop. These folks that are generally employed there live, eat, and breathe the sport.
That's amazing. Now, snow quality is a major factor for skiers. How does Castle Mountain manage the snowmaking and grooming operations to ensure consistent and high quality snow cover throughout the season? You talked about purchasing new equipment in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So prior to 2019, we didn't make snow here at all. We relied solely on what Mother Nature brought us. And that is in itself a huge risk to the business, of course. But we have, over the last, 4 years primarily, we've invested more than $2 million in snowmaking infrastructure. And this is a big part of the reason why, right this moment in time, we're, not announcing, new lift infrastructure going in, because those are extraordinarily expensive, pardon me. We're still working on paying down, some of the debt from the major infrastructure that we've put in, and most notably snowmaking. So generally speaking, we are making snow where we have that underground infrastructure. So maybe I'll back up. In order to make snow, you need high pressure water and high pressure air. And that stuff doesn't just magically appear on the mountain. It's piped up there. So underground, there are kilometers of steel pipe for water. And then that is connected and electrical too. So we need electricity. So we've got electrical cabling and water piping going up the mountain in various locations. And the snow machine or the snow maker is connected to that at where we need it, at those pedestals, I guess we call them. or outlets for water and electricity. So if you can just imagine the infrastructure that's in a city to get water to your home, as an example, we have something similar to that here, except on a mountain in the Rockies. So that's really pivotal. Most resorts are going to have this, and of course, we're no exception in this day and age. And so you connect your snowmaking equipment, your guns, sometimes they're referred to, or machines, and basically that high pressure water is thrust up into the air with high pressure air, and it falls down as snow. Slightly more scientific than that, but when it's cold enough, it'll just fall down as snow. So when we talk about getting ready for the season, snowmaking is a really essential part of this. We spend dozens and dozens and dozens of days and hundreds, if not thousands, of human hours on making it. And it's all in the name of getting a good surface down in the event that Mother Nature doesn't deliver. And even if she does, it serves as a great base to help protect us and our equipment from some of the natural hazards that lie beneath.
Well, that was very educational and informative for me. I hope that our viewers got a lot out of that too. That was Cole Fawcett with the Castle Mountain Ski Resort. Cole, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.